Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Running Toward Life podcast. As we join 11-time Western States endurance run finisher, sports journalist, and author John Trent, as he talks with today's top ultra runners and the race directors and other members of this fast-growing community. Let's see if we can catch up with them and get them on. Hey, John, you there?
I'm here. Welcome, friends. We have a great show today for you today. We have the race director of the Western States 100, Western States, I can talk, sorry. The Western States Endurance Run, Craig Thornley. I think I know Craig well enough that he'll be able to forgive me for botching the name of the race there for a moment. You know, Craig is one of the really influential figures in the sport of ultra running and has been for quite some time. For more than a decade now, Craig has been the race director at Western States, and he's led the race through a period of really unprecedented change, growth, and development. And, you know, prior to that, Craig was and, you know, still could be, he was a top runner himself. He knows how to run near the front of the pack at Western States. He was a race organizer before he joined Western States, a super volunteer, and a really a voice that the sport of ultra running always enjoys to hear. So Craig, welcome.
Hey, John. What my friends tell me is I'm a used to could in terms of runner, my running ability. But thanks for the intro. I appreciate being, I guess, your second guest now on this podcast.
Thanks for coming, Craig. Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that you know it wasn't that long ago that you were running in the top 10 at Western States.
Well, it was a decade ago or more. I think it's 20. It's almost 20 years. 2004 and 2005 were my two top 10 years. So that's going on. What's that? 18 years, 17 and 18 years. Yeah, I'm a used to could.
I got to remember that.
My brother introduced me to somebody in, I forget where it was, Arizona somewhere. And he meant this sincerely. He says, my brother used to be a fast runner. And now he gets it done. And it was a compliment, although it was kind of not a compliment, but I know what he meant. You know, I try to use my head now instead of my physical ability to get to the finish line of races.
Yeah. You're definitely using your head these days for sure, as we talk about Western States. But I'm hoping that we can go back a little bit in time to start with, just to set the table in terms of, why Western States has always been such an important part of your life. I mean, it goes back to the time when you were a teenager, when you first kind of, the race stumbled onto you and you kind of stumbled onto the race. If you wouldn't mind letting, those who are listening, kind of your first taste of Western States and how that kind of really left a mark for you going forward.
Yeah, so we lived in the Bay Area, and my parents got divorced. My stepdad and mom decided, let's go move out to the foothills. So they moved us to Cool, which at first, like, what the heck are we doing out in Cool, California? It's the middle of nowhere, but it's right there in the canyon, the American River, mile 85 of the Western States course. And my brother and I just totally fell in love with being outside all the time. We were in the canyon all the time. We camped. There's no way a parent would let their kids do what our parents let us do back then. But we were camping one June night, 1978. It happened to be right on the Western States Trail. And a runner comes by, he asked us where the aid station was, and we didn't know what he was talking about. And then more runners came by, asked the same question. We realized, wow, they were at about mile 83 or 85 of this 100-mile journey from Olympic Valley to Auburn. And we stayed up all night. We were pretty obsessed. And what really stuck with us, and you've heard me say this multiple times, is it was the look in their eyes. They just had this unique look, and both my brother and I said, wow, whatever they experience, I want to experience too, because it was just something we had never seen before, and it stuck with us. And eventually I started working at aid station with my brother at Dusty Corners, and my mom was there with the captains were friends from Auburn Lake Trails, cool. And I didn't run the race. I wasn't an ultra runner. I was trying to do the high school track and cross country. And then I was on the roads running marathons, and it wasn't until 2001 where I ran my first Western States. And yeah, it was pretty darn special. It was surreal.
With, Craig, I think what's interesting, and even at a young age, your entree into the race was as a volunteer rather than a runner. And I don't even know if you realized it at the time, but I think that speaks volumes about who you are, where the first instinct isn't necessarily to, oh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to win this race and pound your chest. The way you got into the race was by helping.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if that was because I was some incredible human being, but you had to qualify for Western States, and it at the time it seemed like it was something that old people did. Now it's very different. You can come in at 20 years old or 21 or 22 and be successful, but back then it seemed like it was mostly 40 somethings, people that had already had some kind of running career on the roads, most likely. But yeah, I did learn a lot working. I learned how the communities around each aid station, the unique communities around each aid station, how we could go a year without seeing each other. And it was like we were, when we join again at the next year's race, like, my God, this was just yesterday that we were together. And there was that cohesive bond, and it just made these aid stations, these powerful, that they are today. They're just these powerful groups of people that really care about the runners and the race and the trail. And it's pretty hard to top that. Many of the volunteers at Dusty Corners were not runners at all. They were community members, and it didn't matter if you were a runner or not. You were part of this group. And yeah, it was pretty influential, although I didn't really know it at the time, how much I would use, how much of that experience I would use as a race director, however many years later, 20 or 30 years later. But yeah, it was a maybe it is unique today to come in like that, but back then, I don't know. It wasn't hard to get into the race. The lottery wasn't very hard. So you could just sit back and say, oh, well, I don't need to run a qualifier now and get my name in the lottery. I'm going to wait until I'm ready to run. So the factors were different back then than they are now. And if I were to stumble across the race now, I don't know if I would act exactly the same. I would probably start trying to accumulate lottery tickets and get my name so that in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, I could get a chance to run it. But, yeah.
Speaking of the lottery, just so for the uninitiated, although most people who might be listening to this would be ultra runners, but just to give people an idea of how big the lottery is and the weight that's involved. Why do people go through this process of putting their names in with thousands of people each year with the hope that their name is going to be chosen?
Wow. Sometimes I wonder if this is all a dream and people, I'm just making this up, but in my head, but yeah, it's humbling that so many people want to experience Western States. 7,000 people this last year in the lottery for 300. This year it was 380. Some people wait as long as 10 years, getting a qualifier and putting their name in the lottery for 10 frickin' years to get a chance to run it. Yeah, it's humbling. It's often very humbling that, when I'm just down in the details with processing the lottery entrance and doing the math and the Monte Carlo simulation, it's just work. It's just, but when I step back, or if I get an email, like I shared with the captains and I shared with the board members too, we got this email from a runner after last year's race. He was ready to drop out. It was his first time running Western States. He was ready to drop out. And he said, the reason he got to the finish line is because the volunteers cared more about me getting to the finish line than I cared about it myself. Like, wow, that's powerful. Holy cow. Yeah, it's amazing that this many people still want to run this race, but it's an incredible experience. So I want to share it with as many people. I don't want to make it harder necessarily to experience. I want to keep it open for as many people as possible, but that also makes it harder to get in. If we went to a Boston type qualifying system where we could make the qualifying time harder and harder and harder, it would limit the number of people who could experience Western States. At the same time, it would make it easier for those faster runners to get in, right? So I think both of those are hard to put together, but that's where we are.
Yeah.
1,000 people trying to get into the race.
Yeah. Which is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I want to ask you too, we've talked about this before, but I think it might be helpful for folks listening. I mean, obviously, you know, you finished the race, you finished it well. And then a few years ago as race director, you ran the race again. It had been several years. You were you were directing the race as you were running it, sort of. And you finished hours behind your fastest time, but in many ways, it might have been your most fulfilling run at Western States. What was it like to be the race director, running the race, and finishing in a cohort of people really in a race that you had never finished with before?
Well, it was a really stupid idea. I probably should not have tried it. And if my successor comes along, I'm going to say, don't try this, because it wasn't so much race day, but it was the 2 weeks or so before. It happened to be a hard trail year. The snow pack was deep in 2017. So there was all kinds of trail work to do at the last minute. And I didn't even think about my own race until Friday after the pre-race briefing, like 5 p.m. I started talking to, all of my friends were working at the race. So I didn't have my normal crew that I always had, right? But I didn't even think about my own race until 5 p.m. Running early on, I was running at a pace that I expected to, breaking 24 hours is what I was expecting. And somewhere around, even before Robinson Flat, 30 miles, I just felt really flat, and like I am really tired, and I'm running slow. I get into dusty corners, and I had a friend there waiting for me, and he said, "How's it going?" I said, I'm just flat. I don't have any one thing that's bad, but I just feel like blah. And I was getting passed by a lot of people, which was interesting. Some people that I'd never run near before, and it often fired them up. I got passed by someone on Cal Street that used to finish in 7 hours behind me or 8 hours behind me, and they were just lit up like I'm passing Craig. So that was interesting. I was a giver that day, a giver in a different way, and not by choice. And then at Cal 3, I sat a long time at Cal 1 to get my feet fixed, and like 45 minutes, Andy Pasternak helped me with my feet. I still never even thought about, wow, am I getting close to the end, until coming into Cal 3, which is mile 74.3 or something. And they told me, somebody on the clipboard said, you're 50 minutes ahead of the 30-hour pace. Like, whoa, suddenly. And I'd never been in that position ever in my life where I was chasing cutoffs, right? So it was pretty shocking. And I managed to finish. I was 50 minutes behind there, and I finished in 29:11. So I basically did the pace that I had to from there to the finish. When I got into Auburn, I live right here in the 99th mile, and had just this incredible entourage of people and friends, and then we ran around the track. That was pretty darn cool. And I'll say, running into Auburn in the daylight is a lot better. There's a lot more people. There's a lot more going on than if you finish at midnight or 1 or 2. The very front of the pack gets to see that, and everybody after 24 hours gets to see that. But if you're in that 20 to 24 hour range, it's quiet. It's dark. So experiencing the daylight in Auburn was really fun, and then being one of the golden hour finishers that we celebrate all the time, being one of those, I don't think I I don't think I could be as good a race director without that experience, because I know what it's like now. And yeah, it was 7 hours slower than my previous slow time. So it was quite a different crowd that I was running around and finishing for. But I wasn't going to quit. There's absolutely no way I was going to quit. I took a spot as the race director. I mean, I felt that pressure, and it helped me. It fueled me. And I'm glad I did it, but I'm not going to run my 10th as the race director. No way.
So folks who may not know, so Craig has 9 finishes at Western States, and when you finish 10, you get a really nice 1,000-mile belt buckle, and only a handful of people have ever done it. So you're not gonna do that 10th until you're retired as race director, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll probably be too old to even run anymore. But yeah, it won't happen before I retire, if it happens at all. So.
Craig, what is it about that? You mentioned the golden hour, that time between 29 hours and 29:59 before the race is officially over. What makes the golden hour and finishing in the golden hour such a special thing, such a festival of humanity to watch?
Well, it's not the elite runners, right? It's the everyday runner who may have family and jobs and all kinds of obligations, family commitments or life commitments. They're not professional runners, and they get it done. They're getting it done. They're following the same course that the fast people did. They experience everything that the fast people did. It just takes them a hell of a lot longer because they're not necessarily as athletically gifted. They're mentally obviously tough. In order to get to the finish line, you gotta have a mental toolkit that allows that you can pull out and ignore discomfort to levels that non-ultra runners may not be able to understand. Yeah, I think it's because they're more normal people, just non-elite athletes, and it's pretty special. They're doing something that is potentially the hardest thing that they've done. And the drive now, I think what's making the golden hour even more special now is when people get in the race, they realize this may be my only chance to run Western States. So they are completely driven to get to the finish line. And I don't want to disparage what happened at the Canyons this last weekend, the Canyons 100-miler that started and finished in Auburn this last week, but they had a 45% finish rate, 55% DNF rate, which is a really high DNF rate. And several people asked me, well, was it because of the heat? And yeah, it was hot. It was abnormally hot. People weren't heat trained, but you didn't have that extra motivation. Like, this is my only chance to run this race, right? You didn't have that extra little bit that I think drives people so hard to get to Auburn at the finish of Western States. And as that becomes more and more part of the game, is securing your spot. This is my one chance. I think that golden hour is just going to be even more special. Perhaps people who would have tried to run 23:50 something, if things aren't going well early, they're gonna, and I think this already happens, they're gonna go for a finish and not try to risk it by running too fast early. And it just puts so many more people towards the end. We're going to be giving out a lot more bronze buckles, I think, than we do silver buckles, and that's okay. But it keeps our finish rate really high. We're about 80% finish rate average now, with a high of, I think, 86 or 87 is our highest, which is a whole lot higher than 45% that we saw this last weekend on the same kind of terrain and the same heat. So yeah.
And another thing that I wanted to ask you about is, as race director, one of your hallmarks is, you don't ever ask anybody to do something that you can't do yourself. And I think a classic example of that has been the trail work that you've been doing over the past several weeks. For folks who don't know, there was a huge fire, the mosquito fire last fall, which torched several key portions of the race, and the Tahoe National Forest, and some of the Auburn State Recreation Area, it's been closed, and it's dangerous. Things have burned up. There are big trees that can fall on people. There are trees that have fallen on the trail. And you've been out basically from the beginning of this year in good weather and bad, clearing the trail, working on the trail. Why is it so important for you to, you could send people out there yourself, but why is it important that you're a part of it?
Well, you're right. My leadership style is, I would never ask someone to do something that I wouldn't do myself. Doesn't necessarily mean I always do it, but that I wouldn't do myself. And when we had the volunteer service requirement that we forced people to run 8 hours or do 8 hours of volunteer work if they're in the race, I had problems with that. I thought the leadership is how you get people to do trail work. You inspire them, you show them by example, like this is what needs to be done in order for us to run on these trails, to have races on these trails. And it has been humbling. The trail in the Forest Service was just opened this morning. I just announced that. The state section opened a month or so ago. It's been absolutely amazing how much effort went into putting, getting the trail ready. The Forest Service, unbelievable. We paid some contractors to help us out. I'm on, more than 25 days myself of trail work this year. And I got a couple others that are right behind me on that. So, and I love doing it. And yeah, it's just the way I roll.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And I've got to say, you've been an inspiring leader over this past decade plus. Craig, if people want to reach out to you, you're on social media. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you? And you might explain quickly your handle.
Oh, Lord Balls. I'm Lord_Balls on both Twitter and Instagram. And that was a name given to me by my step grandmother back in 2004. She came to, it's not a perverse meeting. Oftentimes people think it's some perverse meeting. She came to Forest Hill to watch me at the race. She was in a convalescent home, so not very mobile. It was a big deal for her to get out there. I get to Forest Hill. I'm in like 12th or 13th place. I'm racing for the top 10. And I puke right outside the aid station. So I don't even see her. I didn't even acknowledge she was out there. So we went to her home, her convalescent home, after the race, Monday or so after the race. And she said, yeah, you ran by like you were Lord Balls or something. And I had never heard the term, but she died not long after that. And I thought, that's kind of a good term. And it means someone who thinks very highly of themselves. Like, well, okay. She got me on that, and the handle stuck, and that's it. So
it's a great story. And with that, Craig Thornley, want to thank you for being a part of the show. Thanks for coming and sharing a bit of your story. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thank you, John. I look forward to reading both of your books.
That's wonderful. Well, folks, that was a wonderful guest. And until next time, we'll see you on the trails.
Well, there you have it. One more great reason to run right back to the Running Toward Life podcast. We want to make sure you like it, you share it, and most of all, come back and listen again. Subscribe even. As we continue to produce Running Toward Life podcasts. Until then, see you on the trail.